Welcome, everybody. My name's Ken Kousen, and in addition to regular training classes, I'm also a professor of computer science at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. One of the classes I teach there is called Senior Seminar, and that's a class on written and oral communications that I teach to young developers. This week, I was at the DevNexus conference in Atlanta, Georgia, and I met up with Trisha Gee, who's a Java champion and a very impressive individual. I thought it would be fun if the two of us could have a discussion on a Zoom call for the students in my class about her career and her information and her advice for aspiring professionals in the IT industry. This is that conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Please let me know. Thank you very much, and welcome to Tales from the Jar Side. Welcome, everybody. This is someone I am very happy to say is a good friend, someone I've known for many years. And this is Trisha Gee. It's pronounced Gee, right? Even though it's spelled G-E-E.
Yep.
And it's Trisha, which was with an S-H and not a
Not
CIA. And I'm going to say a few things about your background, but why don't you give your capsule summary? Because I imagine you have to do that all the time, don't you?
The short version, though.
You don't really?
The short version is, hey, I'm Trisha.
Yeah. Let's start this way. Okay, so where are you working currently?
I work for Gradle. And Gradle, if anyone knows, Gradle is a fairly well-known build tool in the Java community. But Gradle, the company, also has another tool around developer productivity called Develocity.
Yeah, I know it's weird. I have to emphasize that because it's not a word that comes naturally.
It's not easy to type into Google. And
development velocity, right?
Yes.
So Develocity, what they used to call Gradle Enterprise.
Gradle Enterprise, yeah.
But Gradle is still, thank goodness, a distributed company.
Yes.
Yeah,
Fully remote.
yeah. So I think they have a home office somewhere in Germany, right?
Nope.
No, they don't even have that anymore?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, wow.
We had a contract with WeWork for offices, but
Oh,
we're
you
not
did?
even doing that anymore.
How about that? Yeah, I did some work for Gradle along with Schultz Cronje.
I think so.
Yeah, he's in your part of the world. Trisha lives in Spain, in Sevilla.
In Sevilla.
Yeah. Up north, a tiny little country between Spain and France.
Andorra?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
lives in Andorra, although he's a South African
Okay.
who lived in Andorra. And he and I put together a lot of their getting started guides initially, but then that ended. And then I taught the intro Gradle class online every other month for, I don't know, 5 years, something like that, until they brought it in-house, which I knew was going to happen eventually.
We have a recorded version of that now, so we don't do it
Oh,
live
really?
anymore.
You don't do it live anymore?
No.
But the best part of, okay.
It was
I'm not
difficult.
gonna
It was
critic-
difficult to schedule, and we were getting a drop off in the number of attendees. So if you do the video version, then it's on demand, and people can do it whenever they want to do it.
Okay.
But also, yeah, because the developer advocates were giving the courses, and we were like, we don't want to be giving the course every other month.
See, that's the thing. That's why you hire an instructor.
Exactly.
Of course, then the instructor charges you too, but that may have been an issue as well. At any rate, the thing about Gradle is they were truly distributed. You had people in San Francisco and in Berlin and in Australia.
A few people in Australia. We've got people in Czech Republic. We've got people in Belgium.
And
France.
what's the size of the developer? How many developers they have in the States?
The company's around about, I want to say, it was 180. It might be a bit less now. And I would say probably half of that, more than half of that is developers, I would have thought.
Yeah. Now, how long have you been there?
2 and a bit years, 2 years.
2 years. Now, when I met you, I think you had just left MongoDB.
Right.
As I recall.
So when I first started doing advocacy in
Right.
2011, I was working for LMAX, Financial Exchange.
Oh,
And I was doing the disruptive stuff and talking about like low latency trading and high performance Java.
Right.
And everyone was like, Java's not high performance. And I was like, no, it is. So I did loads of high performance Java stuff. And then I went to MongoDB.
uh-huh.
So I worked there for 2 years because I had been a developer at LMAX and I wanted to go into developer advocacy. And Mongo was hiring for a role which is 50% advocacy, 50% engineering.
Okay.
Mongo was not fully remote, but they did have remote workers. This is in 2012.
Right.
And I was living in London at the time. And then I thought, if I'm working from home in London, paying London prices, why don't I move to Spain? So I moved to Spain and worked remotely for Mongo so I was there for 2 years.
Were you married at the time?
No, but my
so that's-
boyfriend was, so I was living with my boyfriend,
Uh-huh.
he's Spanish, and we decided that we could move to Spain and we were planning to start a family, and being in Spain was much better for that.
Yeah.
We didn't want to do it in London. We wanted to be near his family. We wanted like a more family oriented environment to raise the kids in. So yeah, so we moved to Spain. We were like, and also this is Brexit. So as a Brit, I could easily just move there, try it out,
and come back
if I wanted to.
For those who are not aware, by the way, MongoDB is what they call a document database. The natural data structure is JSON documents, JavaScript object notation. So in this rising world of RESTful web services, it's a very natural way to store data, but it's not relational. It doesn't have transactions the same way relational databases have. It doesn't have associations. It has what they call eventual consistency. It's a very different way of thinking, but it's very popular. And in the document database world, it's by far the biggest player, right?
Yeah.
It's the dominant one.
Yes.
Yeah. And I remember you were one of the people who worked on the actual source code. I remember there was a feature in Mongo that you worked on. I remember caught my eye. I remember the design pattern, the automatically closed it's what we do now. We use try with resources blocks.
Right.
And closing a database connection was always vital, and you had to do it in a finally block. But if you wrote it in a particular pattern, it would close automatically. And didn't you do something related to that, or it might have been something else?
When I was working there, we were rewriting the Java driver. The way that it works, MongoDB is a database, right? From your computer program, you need a layer to talk to the database. And so MongoDB was designed to work with lots of different languages. And so we had drivers for Java and Python and Ruby and JavaScript and so forth. And what we were doing is we were rewriting the Java driver so that it would scale more easily, so that it was cleaner code, and so it was easier for developers coding against the database. So we were thinking about a lot of those kinds of patterns, like what is a more natural way to talk to the database, and what are the sorts of things we want developers to worry about and things we don't want them to worry about. And one of those things was closing the database. And the other thing was, how many threads do I have accessing the database? Because, and this is coming off the back of the low latency trading stuff, people tended to think, this is in 2013 to 2015, people were thinking if I have more threads, I will get better performance, without realizing if you're running it on, at that time, a computer with 4 computer cores and you've got 150 threads, then what you get is just the computer going, help me. And so one of the things that I was doing was educating people around what more is not necessarily better, and helping people throttle those things and close off the threads. And a lot of people wanted us, the driver, to take care of all that stuff. And my job was to say, no, your job is to think about what does your application need and how many threads do you have and what is your read and write pattern.
And we'll handle it from there.
Yeah, because we can't predict any of that for you. You need to be able to do that stuff.
So what attracted you to the idea of advocacy as opposed to just coding? Because I knew you were a coder first.
So I went to a conference in about 2005, QCon London.
Okay.
And back then I was a consultant. I was doing Java programming in a bank. So I was on site at a bank, worked for a consultancy firm, doing Java and web stuff. Very common patterns back in 2005, like JSPs and Java and things like that. And the consultancy sent us to this conference. It was like the second year that QCon London ran.
Oh, wow.
I read a lot and I was interested in learning and developing myself. And so I thought I'll go to a conference, and there were all these people talking about stuff that I'd read about, and they were doing it at companies. This is where I first heard Dan North talk about behavior-driven design. This is where I heard ThoughtWorks talking about Eric Dorenberg talking about Selenium for doing driving the UI for tests. Back then, like, no one was doing this stuff.
That's right.
The application I was working on had no automated tests at all. We had manual tests, which took 3 weeks to run the regression test, and you have to manually click through. This is financial software where numbers really matter. So I was learning a lot about testing and about quality and about agile and about the things that I'd read about in books. People were saying, we've done this at this place and it works. And my mind was like, wow, I want to do that. I want to be working at those kinds of places. But I was also seeing these techie people doing techie stuff with these communication skills, like people like Dan North, who's an amazing speaker, like explaining what behavior-driven design is, why it's important, what the pros and cons are. And so I went to that in 2005-ish, and I learned a lot. And then fast forward a few years, I was working at LMAX for the financial exchange. And by that time, I think I'd started blogging when I went to QCon. So by that time, I was blogging a little bit. And we decided so at LMAX, because we'd open sourced a piece of our software and we were trying to raise awareness of that you could do high-speed performance stuff in Java. And also we wanted people to trade on our financial exchange.
Okay.
We were doing what is now called advocacy, but in 2010, 11, wasn't toying with the ideas of maybe evangelism advocacy, but it wasn't really a thing. So I was encouraging people to write blog posts. My boss, Dave Farley, who is now, he runs the continuous delivery channel, just rebranded to Modern Software Engineering. He was co-author of the continuous delivery book. He's like really famous now, but he wasn't really famous then. He was starting to speak at conferences about continuous delivery. His boss was speaking at conferences about high performance Java. So I was starting to see like technical people can be speaking at conferences, writing blog posts and communicating the stuff they've learned. One of the reasons this really appealed to me is because, so at that point I had about 10 years experience as a developer. One of the things I've always done is write stuff down because my memory is so bad. I would write notes to myself. I'd often write the documentation for the software because I'm like, right, now I've got my head around how it works. I need to write that down. I don't want to go through the process of learning that again.
That's partly why I have a newsletter. Yes.
Exactly. People would always say, that's great. This documentation that you've done is really good. So that's where I started. And when I saw that you can use those skills to reach a wider audience and get people to think more about the stuff that they're doing. So I was doing a bit of that at LMAX, and then that's why, and I also, I met a lot of people at ThoughtWorks, and ThoughtWorks are really good at that kind of thing. And so then I ended up moving to Mongo because I could try a little bit of the advocacy role and keep the engineering and do the remote work. And the challenge there was you can't do 50% advocacy and 50% engineering. So yeah, I learned a lot.
I mean, you weren't there very long.
2 years.
Which is maybe to the kids today, that's long, but no, I mean, it's unusually short.
I was at LMAX for 4 years, which is the longest I'd ever been anywhere. Because before then I was in London. So in London, it's not uncommon to do a year, 2 years.
Yeah, right. There's so many options and so many related companies. Yeah,
then I was 4 years at LMAX, which was a long time. And it was a great role and I learned a lot. So Mongo, by the time I got to Mongo, I was like, yeah, 2 years is not super long, but I knew that role was to try and figure out what the next step was. And also, so MongoDB, from an advocacy point of view, was interesting, but from a technical point of view, I don't really care that much about databases. Right? And the database itself was written in C and C++, and I'm a Java person. So there was not a lot of scope for
so
using.
It is in C and C++. I always wondered about that.
Yeah, and they were doing a lot of Go and that kind of thing. And so there's opportunities to do a lot of different technologies there. And I'm a Java person. I wanted to do Java.
So where did you go?
I went to JetBrains.
That's when you went to JetBrains. And I told Trisha that I recommended everybody in the class get a copy of the Toolbox subscription because it's education license. You get everything for free. It's really great that way. What you don't know is one of Trisha's, now this is a self-published book, right? This is a LeanPub book.
Yeah.
One of your books most recently, what's the actual title?
Getting to know IntelliJ IDEA.
Getting to know IntelliJ IDEA. And you wrote that with
Helen Scott.
With Helen Scott.
My best friend since years ago, but so she joined JetBrains while I was there.
Yeah. Did you bring her in, or you knew her from before?
Yes.
Okay.
And she still works there, but she's doing advocacy for a lot of the other IDEs and not just IntelliJ IDEA now. Oh. So she's spread her wings to look at the bigger picture IDE thing.
And I think what I enjoyed about your time there is that you were one of the people making these 5-minute videos.
Yeah.
Or less, really quick videos on here's how you do the database related stuff in IntelliJ, or here's how you do the source code control or whatever.
In the top 3 videos that I've done is the Gradle one.
How do you run Gradle
with IntelliJ IDEA?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people were like, you can see the buttons, but what the video did was, this is how IntelliJ thinks about Gradle. It's not really thinking, obviously, and this is how you need to have a mental model of what's happening with the interactions between Gradle, the IDE, your code, because a lot of people were just getting tripped up on that. So yeah, that video, which I recorded probably about 5 years ago, probably more, is still one of the top performing videos on the channel.
In my Tales from the Jar Side YouTube channel, I made a quick video like 3 or 4 years ago, because I happened to be teaching a training class, and people wanted to use Eclipse with Gradle.
Right.
And I knew how to do it. And I was constantly trying to explain to people, yeah, you can do this or do it this way, it'll work, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I dashed off this video just to record what I'd talk to people about. It's still one of my top 5 videos ever. And
Yeah.
I'd never use Gradle with Eclipse anymore.
Right.
But anyway.
Most people don't, I think.
So were you brought in there? That was a dev advocacy role. You were
Yes.
you were responsible not just for videos, but for what else was involved?
So the story of how I got hired there, which is
Oh,
kind
really?
of interesting,
Oh.
is I was doing advocacy for MongoDB.
Ah.
I was starting to do live demos as part of my presentations.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I thought the interesting story, because I'm trying to find the technical story to tell developers.
Right.
And I don't want to talk about a lot of the MongoDB advocacy was around, this is a document database and this is how relations work. And I'm like, that doesn't sound very interesting.
Right.
What I care about as a developer is like, how do I use it? What is it good for? So I did this demo where I put together an app with Java, obviously. It had an Angular front end with Bootstrap CSS,
Yep.
MongoDB backend, obviously. We had some unit tests. But in order to do that, and I built this app, like now it seems crazy because you could probably just ask ChatGPT to do that in 2 seconds. But yeah, I would build this
Still.
app in about half an hour on stage,
Right.
live,
Mhm.
on nothing. And in order to do that, it really needed you to use IntelliJ IDEA quite like as a power user.
Right.
And I had been using it for a long time and I did know it very well. And so I was giving this demo again in the end for a year. And Hadi, who at the time ran the developer advocacy team
Hadi Hariri.
at JetBrains,
Uh-huh.
he came to me and he was like, why don't you just come and work for us? So every time I gave this talk, people are like, okay, Mongo's great, but
Yeah.
tell me about IntelliJ. Like,
Right,
you're really good
right.
at using it. And Hadi said, come and work for us. And I've been concerned about the MongoDB engineering advocacy split. And I was also concerned because I was living in Spain by this time, like, where am I going to get another well-paid job and still live and work in Spain?
Oh.
And Hadi was like, all developer advocates are remote.
And he lived in Spain.
And he lived in Malaga, which is 2 hours from where I live.
Oh, okay.
And so I knew that they were walking the walk there, and they were going to give me the sort of salary that I wanted, and I would just do advocacy for IntelliJ IDEA.
Yeah,
But I spent 3 years thinking about it, 3 months thinking about it.
Oh, 3 months.
Because
Okay.
I'm like, such a good deal. It's exactly what I want. What is wrong with this? Where's the catch?
Yes, yeah. For those who don't know, again, Hadi Hariri, he's no longer,
He's at JetBrains, but he doesn't head up the advocacy team anymore.
he kind of stepped into a different role. He was the main guy as the advocate for years and years there. And he made a whole series of videos and presentations where he would basically say, let me show you what this tool can do. I don't remember what the titles were, but
Like
they were
52 tips and tricks or 40 something like
exactly.
that.
And they were incredibly hard to watch those videos because you're constantly hitting, okay, pause, I got to try this.
Yeah.
You know, all right, I got to pause again and go try that. So,
I've seen that video about 5 or 6 times.
yeah.
And I know that tool inside out, and I still learn something.
Oh,
every
yeah,
time.
every time. And I'd sit there in his talks. And that was the frustrating part about the talks is you couldn't pause and go try it out.
You were like, I have to watch this later.
Hadi was the reason I was a training partner for
Right.
JetBrains for a number of years. But yeah, so you wound up going there
Yeah,
and you were there for a while,
7 years.
7 years. So
Long
that's
time.
better record. And you,
And I had both kids while I was there as well.
oh yes.
So I gave birth twice while I was there,
How old are they now?
7 and 9.
7 and 9. Oh my goodness.
So I spent 3 months trying to decide if I was going to go to Jet. I started in January. I'd been open with everyone I've been interviewing with, like, I am of this particular age and I would like to start a family. So just be aware that at some point, because I am a woman, it does make a difference. I will need to take a break. And so I had said that to everyone I interviewed with, including Hadi. And so January I start, and in the middle of March, I said to Hadi, I'm pregnant. And I went on maternity leave in the October. But yeah, they got almost a year's worth of work out of me before I went away.
And what they got in terms of value from you far exceeded any possible interruption in your service. But I'm glad you bring that up. The one thing I don't want to do is say, oh boy, I have here a woman in computing. We have to talk about women in computing.
We can.
But we have, as you see, if you look at some of the names, you'll get a sense we have a fairly decent number of women in the class.
I think you have more women in this class than I had in my class of 200
Oh.
when I studied.
I'm hoping it's because that's a change in the industry, although it may just be that it's a Northeastern liberal arts college where we have
Must be a good place to study.
yeah, it could very well be. I don't know what it is. And we have a quite international group as well. We have people from all over. But since you're the one to bring it up, and I respect you technically. Yeah.
I'm a programmer too.
There are a couple things that I can't address for them. And I'll give you an example. We can come back to that one also. But the example that I mentioned to you earlier is sometimes the question comes up is when you're going to give a presentation, how do you dress?
Yeah.
And the advice I learned years and years ago that I've always followed is that you figure out what the level of your audience is. How are they going to dress? And you go one level above that. So if they're all in jeans and a t-shirt, you put on a shirt with a little collar or something.
Right.
You don't have to wear a tie or anything like
Or a
that.
suit or
If
anything.
you're 2 levels or 3 levels above them, it separates you from them too much. They don't feel like they connect to you. If you're dressing at the same level they are, then it's, did you really take this seriously? Was this important to you? Or did you just go, okay, I'll come talk to you for an hour, but I didn't really plan or prepare.
Right.
You show that you're actually taking them as important in that. But that's advice I can give a guy. That's something I can follow.
That does
Women,
not
it's a
work for
whole different, yeah,
It
please.
doesn't work for women because, and I'm talking about women in tech specifically.
Yes,
My
right.
experience is in the Java part of the industry too. So it does vary from community to community. But I found I always dressed up quite a lot for work because I enjoy it. It's fun. I did start working for Ford, which had a formal dress code anyway, formal.
And
business
some
casual.
and some people have a brand. Mark Richards always has a jacket on.
Exactly. So for me, if you go to work, even if it's a casual environment, I got into the habit of I loved skirts, boots. I like tops, which are cool. And I would think about what I was going to wear before I went to work.
That's how I pictured you in the first few presentations I saw
Right.
from,
So-
like a Java 1 or something, which is fairly formal.
So if you look at my earlier presentations, I'm often wearing, so I had a couple of like work smart casual dresses that I would wear because I used to work at banks and that kind of thing.
Oh, right.
And so I'd wear those for presentations because I feel like you have to dress up. And over time, and you spend a lot of time, and bearing in mind, it might not be true now because I started in 2011.
Exactly. Yeah.
In terms of presenting, but like you would have a lot of people coming up to you. They're very supportive. They'll be like, "Oh, it's really nice to see a woman presenting on a technical topic," which is a lovely thing to say. But
Did
you're
you
like,
roll your eyes? Yeah.
you're like, okay, but you don't say to the men, "It's
I
really lovely
know,
that you're
yeah.
talking about tech." So you would
Thank
get that a
goodness.
lot.
Yeah.
I don't get that now, and I don't know if it's because things have changed or because like I have a much bigger presence now and people know who I am.
Right.
But over time, I just got to a point where I would dress in jeans and a t-shirt because I'm like, I'm one of you. I have to be
right.
one of you. I'm not separate. I'm not different. I'm not a weird beast.
And you find that's comfortable? That works better?
So one of the reasons I did it is because packing for traveling is a pain in the ass.
Yes, absolutely.
So I got into a point, particularly when I had the kids and I had a lot of baby brain, like when the kids were really little, you have baby brain and you don't want to think about stuff. You'll pack a pair of jeans, 3 t-shirts and a hoodie. And then you don't have to think about it, which is why a lot of us wear this. And it does help you blend in a bit. But in the last year, I've stopped doing that because I'm like, that's not my brand. That's not what I was. And I want to be able to. So I'm wearing a waistcoat today, which I'm not wearing just for this. Oh, you call it a vest, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that
A
you dress up
waistcoat.
for the students here.
But like I've decided to just wear the sorts of things that I used to wear when I went into the office
Okay.
because it's fun to dress up. But again, you have to be aware of how it might land with the audience.
Right.
So I feel comfortable doing this now because I'm Trisha Gee and people know who I am and I can dress however I want, really.
Right.
But what the main thing to consider, whether you're a woman or a man, is that you have to be comfortable when you're on stage.
Right.
So in the office, I always used to wear short skirts because I love them. When I was presenting, I was like, oh, suddenly feel very self-conscious on a stage above everyone else's eye level. And it's like not a thing you can comfortably do.
No, you're not comfortable anymore.
No.
Right.
And I used to wear heels all the time and I can't do that on my stage either because you're going to break your ankle as you walk up and down.
Yeah.
So there's things, this stupid
Those steps
stuff.
are always higher than you think they're going to be, and you feel like you're way above everybody when you're not. You just feel like it.
Yeah. And if you're walking up steps to the stage, you don't want to be thinking, where am I putting my feet? And the other thing is that you have to think about your hair. Again, it's not just a girl's thing because guys have long hair
see,
too,
I don't have that problem. Yeah.
But like one of the things, if you're nervous, you will often find that you're playing with your hair because that's the thing that you do.
Very
But
good.
when you watch yourself on video, you realize that could be quite distracting for the audience that you're always doing this. So I tend to think about, I've got it up a lot today, but I don't know if you saw yesterday, I had my hair down, but I had it clipped all the way here so that it's not in my face, it's back, but it's still like it's down.
So that gives you an open appearance to the audience.
Yeah.
But if you don't want people to bother you, you bring it forward.
No. But it's, it's all about you have to be comfortable, you have to feel confident. And so whatever makes you feel comfortable and confident so that you can own it, that's what you need to wear.
So where did you start presenting? Because as far as I feel like you've always been presenting. I've seen you at lots of different places at all kinds of different levels. Did you start in a local user group? Did you start as internal presentations in a company? What did you do?
I did do a local user group, but before then, when I worked at Ford, so this is back like 2001.
The auto company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I graduated in 2001. I went to Ford as an undergraduate. I was there as an undergraduate and I went as a graduate. So I worked at Ford over a period of 6 years. I did a number of different placements.
Where was this?
In Essex in the UK.
Oh, okay.
So they've had offices and factories
Yeah,
there for 100 years.
Okay.
And I lived in Essex, which is why I chose to work at Ford, because they've got huge numbers of offices there. So I worked there. My first placement was 1998, after my first year at university. My second placement was a year out from university in 99 to 2000. And then I went back there in 2002 after I graduated. And because I was an undergraduate and a graduate, they had a formal training program. So they trained us in presentation skills.
Really?
Yeah, and they trained us in that sort of thing. And one of the things, in order to decide if they were going to hire the undergraduates after we graduated, you have to give a presentation, give management.
How about that? That ties right into our
It's a very similar kind of thing. So,
good.
And we had to do it in industry. And again, I think it was like 5 minutes or something like that. It was a smallish thing, but these kinds of skills it was immediately apparent, even really before I graduated university, that I needed these skills in order to progress my career, even though I was a programmer. Like I wasn't on the business side of Ford or any of that stuff. And I was like, oh, I don't need to do any of this stuff because all I've got to do is write code properly. And I really felt that. But it was useful to get the job. And then very soon afterwards, when I was a graduate, I was working on the front end. I was doing the web front ends for these new systems that we were building. And so it would be my job to demo these things to the users. These are internal users for Ford, but I would drive to the plant, wherever it was, like a 1.5 drive, go and show the guys on the plant, this is what we're thinking of building, this is how it works, and this is how it's put together. That effectively is presentation skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I did a lot of demos of the first sort of 2-3 years of my career, both at Ford, and then later on I worked for another company where we were doing web front ends, and I had to demo it to the business and say, because they in that company, it was very small. The company was like, I don't know, 30 people in the office with 4 techies. So there's no business analyst. There's no one to run interference between you, the programmer, and the business and what they want. So you have to do a lot of, they say, I want this on the website. And as a programmer, you go, okay, I'll do that. And after a few tries of going, oh, that's not what they wanted. And you have to have this 2-directional conversation. Okay, why do you want that? What is the thing that you really want? And so you end up having to build these kind of communication skills that I didn't know I needed.
In Office Space, I keep picturing the guy going, I have people skills. Right?
Yeah.
I know they're not going to get that reference either. These
too young.
It's a constant issue, yes. But at any rate, I'm sorry. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I did have formal training in presentation skills. And I was also doing demos to customers. And I think that's where some of this ability to give presentations came from.
I'm glad that you're mentioning this because I'm sure they're happy to hear that the sort of thing they're learning this year actually does come up. I know I have examples where I do things like that, but my career is so unusual. It's not typical at all. And it's a very windy path. And it came up in a world that no longer really exists.
Right.
So I'm glad to hear some independent validation for that. Let's say where we left off is you were at IntelliJ and you were making videos and giving presentations and things like that. And you were there about 7 years. And then you decided to move.
I took a break. I got a bit burnt out.
Wait, I remember that.
Because and this is something I think about a lot, I got very good at that. I already knew the product, but as you deliver more content, as a developer advocate, a lot of what you do is content. It's videos and blogs and conference talks and Twitter tips and like lots of things like this. And as I got good at that, obviously they asked for more.
And you assembled a team too, right? You brought in Helen,
Helen, Dahlia and Mala. It was a great team.
They were all excellent.
And so then I had to spend time obviously mentoring and bringing up the rest of the team, but still there's an expectation on me to create this content. And so I had to get really efficient at creating stuff with a deadline, and the deadlines don't always match because you have a conference which is planned 6 months in advance.
Yeah.
And then sometime later, there's a release planned for that time.
Right,
And then
right.
you need to have the videos, but the videos have to be recorded just before the release because obviously the functionality is not ready until the release. But the release is at the same time as a conference. And also, so it gets a bit hairy.
Yes.
So I was juggling this for 7 years and I got better and better at it. But what happened was my day was 100% utilized. There's no slack.
Okay.
And so if you get sick, everything goes
Right.
down the toilet.
And you had the 2 kids at home, so
2
inevitably you're
kids.
going to get sick.
And with the pandemic,
Right.
so the pandemic was about 5 years into my time at JetBrains. The kids at the time were 2 and 4, which was not terrible because they weren't babies anymore,
Right.
and they weren't old enough to really need to go to school.
Okay.
That's where the videos started happening because I was like, oh, I
right.
can record a
'Cause you were
video,
remote and everything.
and I didn't travel
Yeah.
to conferences anymore.
Right.
That's when I started doing videos. So that was good. But as we came out of the pandemic, as the kids got older and went to school, and my mum died as well just before the pandemic, not in the pandemic, just before.
Oh, wow.
And so there was like a lot of, it's not always work, is it? It's all the other stuff on top of the work.
Yeah.
So
It's
it got to a
work-life
point-
balance, really.
Yeah. And I was writing the book with Helen while I was at JetBrains. And then O'Reilly called me and said, do you want to work on Head First Java?
Right.
And this was so the year when I'm starting to feel burnt out, this is all happening. And then in the September, O'Reilly says, work on Head First Java. And I didn't want to say no, but I was like,
We got to give him 2 minutes. Okay. Head First Java was the founding book of an entire series of Head First books written by Bert Bates and Kathy Sierra, who is the lead and really focuses on how people learn. Those books are not great references, but they're phenomenal learning books. In fact, when you hear people criticize the book, it's because they already knew the stuff when they read it.
Right.
If they didn't know it, they love it. They love it. Head First Java, pardon me, was the foundation book in that series. It did so incredibly well. And then they had a second edition a few years later, but it got stuck right around Java 8.
Java 5.
It wasn't an 8. Yeah, it was 5, right? It was terrible.
Yeah.
And it went, I don't know, 10 years without being updated. It
So
was
Java-
forever.
Java 5 would have been about 2006.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Java 5, 6 was around about then.
Because Java 8 is around 2012, maybe?
So O'Reilly called, I met O'Reilly at a conference around about 2012. So that's when I first started going to conferences.
Okay.
And they said to me, Bert Bates needs help with Head First Java because
Yeah.
Java 8 had come out and they wanted a new version of Head First Java. at the time.
Kathy had a bunch of bad experiences, speaking of women in technology.
Yeah.
She was one of the originals to go through the ridiculous levels of harassment, and she withdrew.
Yeah.
But Bert stayed as the series head for O'Reilly, managing that entire series of Head First books. But that meant the book never got updated.
Yeah.
So then, okay.
So they called me about it in like 2012 when they wanted to add the Java 8 stuff to it. And I had
Right.
I had a weekly call with Bert for about 2 years. I was a researcher, so Bert was going to write it, but I was telling him what was new in Java and what was important. And he was building the story of Head First Java. Like I said, this would be, I started when I was at MongoDB, so about 2014. And then Evie was born in 2015. And then I carried on talking to Bert, and then Amy was born, and then everything just fell off the table.
Yeah, yeah.
So then they call me, this is the short version, but they call me in September of 2022.
Oh,
so it's
okay.
like 8 years later.
Right.
And they were like, right, Bert's
Nothing had happened.
Bert's already been writing Head First Java 3rd edition, and he's stuck, and he needs help, and he wants you to help him. But this is the 2022 when I was already feeling burnt out from work, and I was like, I can't do the IntelliJ book, work, kids, the Head First book, and everything. So I said to JetBrains, I'd like to take a sabbatical.
I remember that
take
now.
a break. And that was, I was in a fortunate position. I could do that because I got shares from MongoDB and they make money. So I had a bit of a cushion to be able to take a year off.
Very good.
So in the year off, then I finished the books, which was not a sabbatical, by the way. It's not
That's
restful
not a
writing a book.
sabbatical at all. Yeah, exactly. But I have a hard time picturing you just sitting on the beach watching the kids run around and stuff.
I've done that as well.
Oh, yeah,
Once or
but not
twice.
nearly enough. And then that book came out, and the fun part for me, the fun part I found amusing is you were lead author on that book. They put you lead author. Didn't you wind up rewriting it?
No, I did 4 chapters, and I did 2 brand new chapters. I did Lambdas and Streams. I did
Yeah.
I did lambdas and streams. I did collections, which was almost a complete rewrite from the original collections. And I needed to rewrite concurrency, which I split into 2 chapters.
Yeah.
Huge, yeah. We knew that was coming, but
Yeah.
let's just do the pragmatic approach.
Right.
And then I went over all the other chapters, which Bert had already done some updates on, and I made sure new date and time was in there and new file handling.
Head first books are particularly difficult to write, however. You don't know that because they are not just write the text and show some code. They are puzzles and images with jokes
Yep.
and games and lots of drawing, and they have their own software for all this stuff.
InDesign.
Yeah, which nobody uses InDesign except for actual people in production.
Still got my license since Head First Java. I use it for all sorts of stuff.
Good for you. I was considering writing a Head First book. I was gonna do the Head First Spring book because they wanted it. They still want a Spring book. And I saw what was involved in doing it, and I went, no, I can't.
Done it. I wouldn't have done a new book. The reason I did Head First Java is because I wanted to help update an existing.
But that's a huge selling book.
I mean,
Did the 3rd edition do well?
yes.
Oh, good.
Like
good.
my royalty percentage is very small because I'm the 3rd author
Yeah,
on
exactly.
the 3rd edition, and I still make more money from that book than the other books put together.
Really?
Yeah. So, which is not loads, but all sorts of.
Yeah, and I have not. I'm still waiting for my book to go viral. Any of my books to go viral. So I get it. No, very good. I remember being very happy hearing that you were going to do that update. By the way, I still use one of your examples in one of my training classes.
Okay.
When I teach, we have this training class I do called Upgrade to Modern Java. And it really started out as an upgrade to Java 8,
Yes.
which tells you how long ago that was. And we still run that on O'Reilly every few months, and it still fills. I
Sure.
can't believe it. It's been 10 years
Do you
since Java
do
8
this
came
to
out.
8 or you do this?
No, I take it to 17
Yeah.
now.
All right.
But really, I take it to 11. I do some records, but mostly it's basically Java 8 stuff because they don't know any of that. It
Yeah.
takes 4 hours to get through all that
Right.
stuff. But one of the demos I do at the end is a refactoring demo, which is just like what you did. It was basically taking a loop with an if statement
Yeah.
and
Like some checks or something.
yeah, and then just refactoring it to stream and collect
Yeah.
and filter and like saying, okay, which would you rather write? And I totally stole that from you.
That's absolutely fine.
I
I
got it.
put a lot of
You
effort
did.
into those
You actually
examples. I'm
made
happy you
it
used
was
them.
a little video or an animated GIF. I don't remember which one it was,
Yeah.
or GIF, whatever you call it.
Probably
It was
on
right on
Twitter.
the webpage. It was a little blog post you put up there.
Yes.
Yes.
I used to do that.
And it was this little refactoring there. I'm like, oh my God, that's exactly what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I made some slight changes and I tried to give you credit at least the first couple of years. I haven't done it since then.
No, but the whole point about advocacy is not so much to get the credit, but to get it out there. And if you're using the material and people are learning from it, then I win.
Okay, so you took the year off, wrote the book.
Yep.
And how long were you at JetBrains before you decided, okay, that's enough, it's time to move on?
So I took the year off. My plan had always been to get another job, not
Yeah.
to go back to JetBrains.
No, I understand. Oh, really? You
yeah.
leave even then?
Yeah,
So you
so I
knew,
took the
okay.
sabbatical because I knew I was burnt out and I didn't want to burn any bridges.
Right.
I might want to go back, or maybe I might want to do a different role there because there's plenty of opportunities. But really, I was like, I want to get a different job. I don't want to be job hunting while I work for a company because I've got wide reach on socials, but you can't say I'm looking for a new job when you work for someone else. It's a bit
Well,
rude.
it is much easier to get a job when you have a job.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I really needed to be not working for JetBrains in order to use some of the network that I've
Okay.
built up
Right.
and the reputation that I've built up to say, can I have a new job?
It's a challenge.
My plan was to take 12 months off. It took us like till I started the time off in January. It took us till November to finish the IntelliJ book class. So in September,
Oh, that was concurrent though. You were doing that while you were doing other things.
so Head First Java was the first 3 months of the year. Then I picked up IntelliJ IDEA again, came back to the IntelliJ IDEA book,
Right.
which I was working on till about November.
Oh, it reminds me, you'll have to give me a coupon code to
Yes.
share with the
You
students.
yes, that's fine. We can give it away for free to students.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah, for the IntelliJ IDEA book.
Oh my God. Hey, look, see, I hope the reflected glory here is helping out. Yeah.
Just, you
Anyway.
just have to go on Blue Sky and say nice things about the book.
Yeah.
What you want. Yeah, so we didn't finish the book till November, but in September, I'm like, oh, I should probably start looking for a new job. And my plan had always been to take 12 months to look around and get a feel. But in September, I'm like, I need a job. I need to get something. So I started using my network. I probably reached out to you and I
Oh, yeah.
reached out to a bunch of people and was like, what are you doing? Which is cool. Is there anything
And my
interesting?
response was, I'll follow you wherever you go. I don't know. Didn't have anything for you, but yeah.
And then Vincent, who runs this conference that we're at, he
Right.
said, I'm
Vincent
working at
Myers.
Gradle.
Vincent Myers is the one who gave me the name Tales from the Jar Side.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when he was at Oracle, he had me come and do one of their small little conferences. And I gave a keynote and I was trying to come up with a name, and he suggested that because it was talking about my history with Java.
Right.
And it was Tales from the Jar Side. And I just made that into the name of my newsletter and the name of my YouTube channel. I've been using it ever since. It's all Vincent.
Vincent Myers.
Exactly. So you talked to Vincent.
Yeah, so he reached out, he said, I'm at Gradle.
Oh, he was at Gradle at the time.
Yeah, and he was like the community guy. And he said, they're building up their advocacy team here. And I said, I don't really want to work with a build tool. I like Gradle build tool. And like I said, I'd done the video for JetBrains and like I get it. But I didn't want to spend years just talking about Gradle build tool.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can talk about a build tool.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, no, not the build tool. We're doing developer productivity stuff.
Oh.
So then I started having conversations with them. I saw the new tool, Develocity. The thing that really got me about that is it detects flaky tests. And I hate
I've talked to the
flaky
guy
tests.
who did, what's this, Eric?
Yes.
Eric, I can't remember his last name.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought the guy who played with, he was showing me the AI that figured out the flaky tests and all that stuff.
That hooked me because when I worked at LMAX, so again, we're going back to pre-2011, one of the things I used to do, because we had this great testing suite, and every morning I would look at all the tests and go, I don't know why it's so red, because we're pretty diligent about fixing all the tests. And it's because some of them didn't always pass. They were flaky. I would go through and rerun all the failing tests and see which ones were flaky and which ones weren't. Send out an email and say, these ones are flaky, these ones are broken. And then someone automated that and automated the whole process and called it Auto Trish. I have a tool named after me that detects flaky tests. This is in 2009.
This should be in your bio. Yeah. Auto Trish.
I've talked about it before, but it's not in my
I've never
bio.
heard that.
And one of the folks I used to work with at LMAX owns the Auto Trish Twitter handle. And I'm like, please, can I have that?
Oh, did they give it to you or not?
No, because he was no longer on Twitter by the time I pinged him on Twitter. I don't have his email address. So I should register it on Blue Sky. Oh, please don't register it for me. So I was caring about flaky tests in 2009. So when Gradle has a tool which detects flaky tests years later, these guys, so 15 years later, I'm like, really? 15 years has gone by and no one cares about flaky tests yet.
Yeah.
This is crazy. So that's really what sold me on the role. So I could go and do advocacy and talk to developers about long, frustrating builds, which we've all felt. I could talk to them about tests that take too long to run, flaky tests, and being able to have some visibility over the stupid stuff that slows us down as developers.
Now, I talked to you when I was writing the Modern Java Recipes, and I also talked to you when I was writing my Help Your Boss Help You, the one that's supposed to be called Managing Your Manager.
Yes.
And I reached out to you to write the forward for, I think it was the Java book.
The Java
right?
one, yeah.
Yeah, because the other one, I got a manager. I used Glenn Vandenberg. I don't know if you know him, but he's actually a manager. But yeah, I reached out to you for the Modern Java Recipes book, because again, I learned a lot of that streaming stuff from a variety of sources, but you were one of them because I watched your presentations and everything on all that stuff. And you were kind enough to write the forward for that.
I liked that book. I liked the format of the recipes, and I liked the fact that they felt helpful to me, that you could flip through these and go, oh, I can use that.
That would be one of the tiny fraction of royalties compared to the giant head first Java royalty. Yeah, I don't know how much that makes progress at all, but that was an O'Reilly book. You know?
I spoke to O'Reilly because I remembered the recipes format. I asked them if I could do an IntelliJ recipes book, but they were like, the recipes books don't really sell very well. So I was like, okay, then I won't.
You know, which is crazy because they say things like that, and then 6 months later they'll come back and say, hey, can you do a recipes book for us? You just never know what they're going to do.
Because the way the books and the way that we consume learning is changing so quickly.
My impression or my opinion about books is that you don't buy a book to learn something now. You buy a book to learn what's important. It's curation, because there's way more information out there on the internet than you could possibly fit into a book.
Yeah.
So when you're going into a book, you're trying to find out, what did this author think was important and worth emphasizing, and put a coherent story around.
Yeah.
That's what the book tells you.
You don't buy a book to read it, you buy it to put it on the shelf and ignore it.
I'm okay when people do that with my book,
because they pay for it.
Exactly, because then the company gets the sale, I get a royalty, and nobody finds any bugs. And it's like, where's the downside? People apologize to me. I've got your book on the shelf. I've never opened it. I'm like, it's fine. That's
That
great.
to me in our conference in San Francisco. They're like, he was next to me in the lunch queue. He's, oh, you're Trisha. I've got your book. And I'm like, great. He said, I hadn't read it. I'm like, no, but you paid for it.
Exactly. Yeah. What difference does it make? Yeah,
But
exactly.
no, the curation is a good point. One of the reasons why I focused on Java 8 when I moved to JetBrains in advocacy is because I was talking to Bert about Head First Java, and I knew I was going to need to do some Java 8 stuff. And one of the things I did was buy books, actually invest my money in
Yeah,
buying books to
right.
learn what was happening with Java 8 for exactly that reason, because I could research it, but I needed it to be from trusted sources,
Right.
put in a way where I'm like, this is important
Yeah,
and this is
the
not.
author of the core Java series, a blanket on his name, Kay Horseman,
Yes,
had a,
of Java 8 for the impatient. Yeah.
he had, not only did he have for the impatient, he had Java 8, core Java 8 for the really impatient.
Nice.
That's the one I learned it
Yeah, yeah.
because that's the first book I read, like the whole thing online, because it was short and it was right to the point. I'm like, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I used Java
Yeah.
8 for the impatient, not for the really impatient.
Yeah,
Java
yeah.
8 stuff.
Uh-huh.
And a couple of others, but that was the key one because it's a good diff between what I knew and where I needed to be.
I finally met him at J. Creed, and he
Right.
was every bit as nice a guy as I was hoping. You never know, right?
Yeah.
But no, he was charming. He was very good. Okay, let's shift a little bit to more of what the students are going
Right,
to be
to what they
focused
care
on. I hope they're enjoying this anyway, half as much as I am. I don't know. But you've now been a professional speaker and all these other things for a pretty good career at this point.
Yeah.
What advice would you give people just starting out at their level, people who are looking at internships, looking at their first couple developer jobs or things like that? Anything you can think of that,
So much.
again, yeah,
It's difficult to narrow it down.
they can filter.
I think probably the most important piece of advice that I didn't know when I was at university. So I did a traditional computer science. I did computer science and AI actually,
Oh,
but I
wow.
did a computer science degree, a 3-year degree.
Uh-huh.
I happened to take it a year in the middle to go and work for Ford. So it took me 4 years.
Mm.
And when I came out of it, I learned Java at university. And we were one of the first universities to start doing Java because this is back in 1997. It's a long time ago.
In our department, they do Java and Python.
Which makes a lot of sense. So when I came out, I knew I liked programming. That's why I went in to do computer science. I thought the only job that was available to me was programming, even though I'd done my internship at Ford. So I'd seen a bit more. And I was like, I can either be a programmer or like a business analyst or a project manager. That's what I thought the options were. Data DBA, maybe. So yeah, I got this idea of these traditional silos. And I think that's still prevalent today that people think that.
Hartford's got a lot of insurance companies. They tend to be very traditional. You get QA people, you get business analysts, you get all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd worked with consultants as well. So I understood the idea of technical consultants who come in and either consult with you or do hands-on code. But really, I was like, it's programming. And once you get to a certain level of maturity, people are going to want to promote you into management.
Right.
Which I didn't want to do. And so I was like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing with my career. And I'm 25 years into my career now, and I still don't really know what to do with my career. But what
Which,
have
by the way,
learned-
is a good lesson too.
Yeah, what I have learned
Don't worry
is that
about it.
you don't need to worry about that. There's a lot more, many more roles in technology that we didn't know about. My best friend Helen, so we did the same degree. We both came out and did Java programming jobs. She, as her next job, she ended up teaching English as a foreign language.
Oh,
And then she ended up circling back to become a technical writer. And I ended up eventually becoming a developer advocate. And then now we're both developer advocates. So we've taken these somewhat different routes to get to the same kind of role. But we didn't know what a technical writer was when we were at university. And developer advocate was not a thing.
yeah.
And now at my kind of level, there's lots of different types of things I could do. I could be like, you've done training, right? I could be a trainer or a consultant or these days it's much more acceptable to have 20 years experience and only be a programmer. You're an individual contributor and that's like a celebrated thing. So to try and cut down the advice, if you don't know what you want to be when you grow up, it's absolutely fine. And there's lots of different options. My advice would be, if you have the possibility, I was in London, so I was lucky, try out lots of different jobs. Don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to fail. I've had 3 jobs where I was only there for 3 months because I did it and I was like,
no, this isn't going to work.
and that's what probation period is for.
Yeah.
And I know the laws in the US are a bit different, but in the UK and in Europe, it's quite often a probationary period where, with a week's notice, you can be like, it's not for me, don't want to do it. And that's fine. It's okay to be like, I tried something different and it didn't really work out. I will go back to what I know best.
And as you say, the job you have now did not exist.
No.
I say that to them too, but they're not surprised by that. Fire barely existed when I was there. But yeah, it's very flexible, very open to new possibilities and interesting things.
And remote work was not a thing. Like
That's right.
When I worked at Ford, it was a big open plan office to see in the movies.
Oh my God, I
My
hated
parents
that.
were teachers, so I didn't know anything about business. I only knew about education. I've been to school and my parents were teachers, so that's what they did. So I worked in this very traditional, big manufacturing office, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like me for the rest of my life. And is this really what I want to do? And
Yeah.
it's not, because you have big companies like that, you have small startups, you have not for profits, you have education companies, and even if you have the job title Java developer at all these different places, your job is going to be very different,
Yeah.
and it's going to look very different.
And
Yeah.
the image you get from media, from television or
Oh,
whatever,
so wrong.
it's no. Yeah, what you're asking me to do is totally impossible. Oh, here it is. No, it doesn't work.
No.
Never
And if
works
they
like
did,
that.
if they were slightly more accurate, it wouldn't be type, it would be thinking,
Right.
how does that work? Where should
Uh-huh.
I put that? How do I do that? Because the keyboard is not the bottleneck.
Very good. Very good. I like that. Actually, I think that kind of covered most of the stuff that I was planning to ask you about.
Okay.
Is there anything about specifics about presentation, either preparation or
Right.
the skills themselves, or anything you would recommend in any of that?
I've got loads. Fortunately, I wrote down some of my advice in a piece which Charles Humble wrote for O'Reilly, actually, so I can give you the link to that.
Okay.
Me and Holly Cummings gave our input on his thing because, again, he wanted to ask some women presenters as well to see if there's any subtle
Any
differences.
differences, yeah.
So that's quite a good piece. But
It's incidentally, by the way, I've had male managers and women managers, men and women. And sometimes people ask me, is there a difference? And I say, here's the thing. Sure, there are differences. But the real difference is that management styles come from the top.
right,
And everybody who wants to succeed in management starts imitating the things they see from the top. So that's a much bigger effect
yeah,
than the differences between men and women, which
would
could
agree with
be
that.
personalities. It could have nothing to do with it. But the style at the top matters a lot. So that's what I look at when I look at companies sometimes. What's the top person like?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So you wrote this thing for
Yes.
O'Reilly, and what was anything interesting presentation wise? Or?
I don't remember, but they can read that.
Oh, yeah.
The piece of advice that I normally give is the most important thing, and I've mentioned this already, the most important thing is to feel confident, okay? And you're not going to be confident because it's going to be like one of your first presentations and you're nervous and it's difficult, but you can do small things to try and improve your confidence. The first thing that I usually tell people when I'm coaching them in presentation skills is the audience generally wants you to succeed.
Yes, certainly this audience will.
The audience does not want you to be uncomfortable. They don't want your demo to fail. They don't want you to be nervous because it makes them nervous. So if you remember that the audience is on your side, they support you and they will give you space to find your words or whatever, then that can help settle you down. And another piece of advice that I got from one of my various people training me was where you think you're pausing for ages to find the right word, and it feels like a 10-minute gap.
Yeah.
It's not, it's 5 seconds.
Uh-huh.
And the audience is absolutely fine with that. So take your time, find the word and take a breath. And that's absolutely fine.
It's actually, once you do that a couple times, you can start to use it as a tool to get everybody back.
Yes.
Because when you stop talking, everybody's, oh, did I miss something? You start focusing right in.
Yeah.
And then you start up again and they forget that you paused.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And all you were doing was recentering yourself and remembering what was my next point I wanted to make and how am I going to talk about this? And you've brought everybody back in.
Yeah. There's a lot of things you worry about as a beginner presenter, things like losing the word, things like, what do I do with my hands?
Oh, yeah. What do you do with your hands?
One of the things I learned is that it's good to use your hands, because, and especially I live in Spain now, so we do this way.
Oh, that's right.
But I had to relearn the trick when I was starting to do videos with the teleprompter, because you want to stand here like this and read, and you sort of have to force yourself to use your hands in a particular way. So yes, you can be expressive. Do whatever you want to do with your hands as long as you're comfortable. But try not to think about it.
It's as long as it's natural.
Yeah.
Right.
And another piece of advice that I got, which was helpful, I don't know if they're going to have I have to stand at a podium or anything like that.
It can be, they don't have to use it.
Exactly.
So it's up to them.
The lectern thing or podium or whatever you want to call it.
Either way.
So if you read things like how to be a great presenter, they'll tell you to stand in the middle of the stage and take up the space.
Oh God, yeah.
That's so terrifying when you're a new speaker. And so my presentation coach was like, You can hide behind the lectern if you want to. If that will make you feel more comfortable, if that will allow you to get your message across, you can hide behind there. You could rest your hands on it or put your hands by your side, and that's okay. You don't have to be giving a TED talk.
There's something you've done that I rarely do. I rarely give joint presentations with
Right.
anybody. I generally am just by myself, but that's part of being a one-person company kind of thing. But you've given tons of co-presentations,
Given a
and we
few.
have some teams who are trading off between 2 and sometimes 3 people. Any recommendations on any of that?
It's much harder than you think it is.
It really isn't it? Yeah,
I
yeah.
have given a bunch of joint presentations. I
Really have to trust the
want
other
to.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, for a number of reasons. One is that making time with someone else to prep together is really difficult because you've
Yeah.
got to find the right
Scheduling and
time.
all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I gave a presentation with Josh Long at
Oh,
Java 1.
oh my God.
And like, I love Josh. He's one of my
But
favorite
he's so
people.
high maintenance.
He leaves stuff to the last minute. And we're at Java 1. I'm at his apartment in San Francisco prepping this talk. And that's not how I prep. I need to be able to prep a couple of weeks in advance and reiterate and refine, but that's not how Josh works.
No.
So if you're presenting with someone else, you need to either find a flow that's going to work for both of you, or ideally pick someone whose flow is going to work for you. When I presented with Holly taught me a lot of things actually, because so she's not a professional developer advocate. She has like a proper job where she has to do engineering. So she has like less time to do the prep. Whereas I can, if I want to, I can set aside like 2 weeks to create a new presentation. So she sketched out the slide deck and then she was like, we'll just fill that in and then we'll just present that. And I'm like, that's far too simple, because what I do is I sketch out the slide deck and then I rework it and then I rework it and then I rework it, usually about 5 or 6 times. But she's, no, we're not doing any of that. We don't have time for that. And with the two of us, it's just better if we just focus on what we've got and make it good.
You don't want to know how late I've left some of my on the No Fluff tour. We are notorious for, oh, it's the morning of the presentation. I really should put some slides together, shouldn't I?
Done that.
And then there's Venkat, who just live codes everything. But
yeah,
I don't like that the way I used to.
I don't recommend demos. Oh, that's another piece of advice. Don't do live demos.
Don't do live demos? No. Just have a backup. That's what I always tell them. If something goes wrong, you have to have a video or backup code or something so you can appeal to that when necessary.
If you really want to do a live demo and if you're comfortable, by all means.
Why don't you like live demos?
I mean, that's interesting. I've done a lot of live demos. Yeah. I'm really good at them.
And I like it. Yeah.
But every live demo takes about 6 months off my life.
Okay. So it's the pure stress. Yeah.
Stress. And especially when I was doing live demos on the Java 9 one was the worst one, because I was demoing Java 9 before it came out.
I remember that.
So every time I gave this talk, Java 9 had changed.
Everything changed, right?
IntelliJ had changed. I had to take Gradle out because it didn't support Java 9 yet. So and this is when I was working for JetBrains before I worked for Gradle. And so every time I would have to make sure that at least 2 days before the presentation, for a presentation and demo that was already prepared, given, I would have to reopen it up, re-update it, make sure everything still worked, maybe rework the demo, and you have to practice it so it's smooth when you give the demo. And after that, I was like, I'm not doing this. And I do still give live demos, but now I don't do these big arcing stories anymore.
Well, they have the advantage if they only have to do this once. I mean, it only has to work that one time.
A backup is a good example.
But a backup, yeah, you got to have a video, because what happens when the internet doesn't work, or when anything could go wrong.
Yeah. I usually have a video. I have a recording. And usually my live demos now are stuff that I know really well. They're much shorter, much more focused, and things I know really well. So I don't have to practice it. I can just look at my notes and go demonstrate, search everywhere or whatever.
I'm keeping an eye out. I haven't seen any questions pop up on the chat. Again, feel free if you have any questions for Tricia. This is your one chance to get a chance to talk to her, although we will share your contact information. So if you get random emails from a place called trincall.edu, you'll know what happened.
That's fine. You can email me and it can go to the bottom of my email pile like everyone else's emails.
Yeah, your delete key that's what I say. I say my delete key works as well as anybody's.
I just delete anything, but now I've got
you archive it, right?
Email. That's all there. I'm like, I will get to you, but I don't. So things I've got one of the publishers chasing me at the moment. They want me to have a quick look at this Quarkus book. And I'm like, it's been in my inbox for 2 weeks.
Okay, that's what I should ask you. What's the future ahead? Where are you going next? What's on your horizon? Have you thought about it? I'm sure you've thought about it.
I think about it a lot.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I don't really know.
Gradle is not a company where people stay forever. The founders maybe, but people
It's-
come and go there.
Any company which is going through growth, you
Yeah,
have to
yeah, yeah.
consider whether it's going to grow in the same direction as you.
And they
Yeah.
change a lot.
And which is fine, and everybody knows that's part of the
Right.
deal. So
Exactly.
yes,
So this
that's
is not
why.
a bad thing. It's
No,
just,
exactly. So I'm not saying bad things about Gradle, but you have to be prepared for their growth to go this way when you want your growth to go that way. And that's why you have to think about your future frequently, like every 3 to 6 months. You might be thinking, what is it I want now? Even if you don't make changes. Obviously, I have the books. This conference has made me realize I need to update the IntelliJ book, but I'm not very excited about that.
How long has that been out? 2 years?
It's 2 and a bit years since the first edition came out. Then, of course, they changed the entire UI. So we had to
Exactly.
do with the second edition.
Right.
And now there's a few changes which need to be made, but also I'm considering about whether to put AI in there or not. But anyway, that doesn't matter.
Okay.
So
Okay.
maybe we might do that. But what I am working on is a training course for IntelliJ IDEA.
Ah, right.
I can talk about all the stuff I'm doing, which is non-Gradle, because I've got plans there. So I'm working on Introduction to IntelliJ IDEA, which will be a pre-recorded video training course, which will probably be available through Dave Farley's Modern Software Engineering channel.
Oh, okay.
So that's the plan at the moment. And then the reason I did that one is because what I wanted to do was IntelliJ IDEA for professional developers.
That's
based
what
off
I
the
was.
books.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But when I was doing that, I was like, oh, but they need to know this, and oh, but they need to know that. And I didn't want to put all the beginners stuff in that course.
Right.
I need to do the beginners course first,
And an advanced
set the
course. Yeah.
prerequisites. So those are definitely things. I'm also thinking about creating. Oh, yeah. And because I've done the introductory course, I haven't recorded the videos yet, but I've sketched out what it looks like. I've realized, oh, this could be a book as well. So maybe I might do that. But
Now you're facing a problem that most successful people face in our industry. Is you have more ideas than you have anywhere near enough time to do.
And the
Yeah.
ideas are not, they don't
That's-
make enough money that I can stop working.
That's
on the
another thing
ideas.
I need to make sure the students understand. You sometimes feel, I've got this idea, I've got to do it. What if I forget, or what if somebody
yeah.
else takes it, or something like that? Ideas are
cheap.
a dime a dozen. You will find ideas everywhere. If you are open to them, if you're willing to accept ideas, if you're willing to say, oh, I'm going to write something down, or I'm going to make some content or whatever, then don't worry about it. Ideas will be there. The
Yeah.
hard part is turning an idea into polished results. you know?
Yeah. I had an idea about 20 years ago about a book. I was going to call it Politics for Programmers.
Oh,
It's all about like thinking about like how diplomacy works inside a
that'd
company.
be a companion to my managing your manager book, wouldn't it?
Exactly the same thing. And so I've never written it, but it's an idea that I had a long time ago. And sometimes I go, oh, all my stuff is outdated. And it was very based on London tech scene.
I understand. Yeah, I got the same problem.
At least
Yeah.
one day I'll get back to that.
Yeah, maybe you just need the right co-author for that one. I don't know.
Maybe. But a lot of it is really right place, right time. So if you can't force an idea.
No.
Obviously, you have to invest a lot of energy into getting stuff done.
The way I always heard that analogy was an idea is like picking an apple off the tree.
Right.
And if some of them aren't ripe yet, you just don't want to, you just look at that sapling and you go, no, it's a good idea. I better keep an eye on that one.
Yeah.
I'll work on it periodically and wait for it to get ripe. But if
Yeah.
you leave it too long, it rots and then it's no good.
Sometimes you have to put it to one side. Like I respect what you did about the Java and AI project
right.
you were working on, because when I read your update on that, I felt really sad for the amount of work you put into something, but you were right to go, the niche is not there now. It's not the right time.
And none of that's wasted.
You
You
learn
learn
a
a
lot
ton and it will show up elsewhere. You'll get a chance to use all that material in one form or another. And not only that, it gave you an excuse to learn all that.
Exactly. So one of the things I used to say to my team at JetBrains, because we were very focused on content, sometimes they'd be like, I spent so much time on this, but I still haven't really got the thing. I'm like,
cost fallacy.
but the output is not the content, it is the learning. That's what you've got.
Yeah, I went the wrong way on that. Okay, yeah.
So yeah, sometimes you don't need to focus on a deliverable, because sometimes the deliverable is just, what did I learn? And I can use it in the future, and it might just take a different shape.
Yeah, deliverable and a deadline really helps you focus, but it's just a tool, like anything else. Yeah. Why don't we wrap this up? Any last things you wanted to say to them or whatever? Or I will bug you about the license for the book.
The book, yes.
And the website you mentioned with the article on it that was written for
Yes,
O'Reilly.
the O'Reilly one.
And I think that's it, right?
That's fine. I have no problem with that.
Well, it's so good to see you. And I knew you were going to have trouble scheduling something to be here.
I'm really pleased that we could do this.
Yes.
I had to email you and say, I can't do the date that I promised. And then
I knew you felt terrible.
when you saw my calendar, you're like, oh, I see. Now I know.
No, and I knew how bad you felt. And I'm like, no, we.
You wanted to do this.
And then you said you were worried about having time to prepare. I'm like, no, this is not like that. I'll just talk to you. You'll be fine.
That I can do. I can just talk.
Great. Thank you very much. And I don't see, there's questions just saying, just thank you. Basically appreciative comments.
Now, thank you
And
for having me.
Good. And now we can stop bugging everybody else in the speaker room
Yes.
sitting over here.